course. You all should go first. The primary audience here is, of course, the South Korean public. So, so please go first. Speak in Korean, and then tell me when to speak, and I'll be happy to do that.
All right. Okay. That's great. 저분은 지금 진행 언어에 대해서 말씀하시는데 그게 아니고 순서를 내 생각에 신 박사가 먼저 될 것 같지 않아? 나중에? 그죠? 예. 네, 그게 더 나을 것 같지. 내가 뭐 그런 식으로 얘기해 볼게. 오케이. 감사합니다. 오늘 이렇게 긴급하게 지금 언론중재법 개정안에 대해서 회의를 하게 되었습니다. 그 이유는 지금 개정 논의 중인 언론중재법이 지금 4일, 5일 기간 내에 통과될 것 같다는 그런 부정적인 전망이 강하기 때문에 이렇게 긴급하게 사람들을 모셨고, 지금 보시다시피 지금 참석을 위해서 그 LA에서 택시를 타고 움직이시는 분도 계시고, 이렇게 긴급하고도 또 어려운 모임을 하게 되었습니다. 그래서 근데 그 짧은 시간 중에서도 또 여러분들이 참석해 주셔서 우리 안철수 대표님과 저희 당의 안철수 대표님, 그리고 권은희 의원님, 최연숙 의원님, 그리고 또 우리 안혜진 대변인님, 그리고 김근태 최고위원님, 그리고 현재 양당 협의체에서 이 문제를 오늘도 논의 중이신 신희석 박사님, 이렇게, 그리고 좀 이따 소개드리겠지만 자레드 겐서, 그리고 프리덤 나우의 설립자이시고, 그리고 국제적으로 유명한 인권 활동가이신 자레드 겐서 씨하고, 그리고 조금 이따 다시 참여하실 이제 전 UN 표현의 자유 보고관 데이비드 K UCI 교수님과 이렇게 이 문제에 대해서 토의하게 되었습니다. 저희 회의의 근본적인 동기는 이 법안의 문제점들을 지적하고, 그리고 국제적인 여론의 부정적인 비판에도 불구하고 지금 이 법안을 통과시키려는 데 대한 우려와 또 대안을 제시하기 위한 것입니다. 맨 먼저 저희가 국민의당의 대표이신 안철수 대표님의 발표를 통해서 회의를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. All right. The reason we have gathered in such a short time, within a short time span, is that the majority party, as we all know, is about to pass the bill to amend the Press Arbitration Act, which in our view, and which also in the view of the international community, that would impair the integrity of the freedom of expression. And also it will exert such a negative, may exert negative consequences upon other democracies and other nations. And I'm very proud and happy that we could finally get together with Mr. Jared Genser and with all the esteemed members of the People's Party, and also Dr. Shin Hee-seok, who is now working even today as a member of 8-member inter-party consultation body. So let us begin by introducing the leader of the People's Party, Mr. An Chol-soo, and we will welcome his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chol-soo An, party leader in People's Party in South Korea. Thank you for joining us this important meeting. Let me start my prepared speech first. Article 19 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights proclaimed that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. As early as in April 1919, the Provisional Government of the Republic of Korea, in Article 4 of its Constitution, constituting charter manifested that the people are entitled to enjoy the freedom of the press, writing, and publication. Subsequently, the first Constitution of the Republic of Korea in 1948 stated that in Article 13, the right to press and publication should not be subject to limitation. The present Constitution also manifested that all citizens shall enjoy the freedom of speech and the press. The freedom of speech and press is the essential and fundamental part of the universal human rights and justice. It is a proud legal instrument that has created and completed democracy in this country. I, as a citizen and as a statesman of this country, wish to make a solemn pledge that I will never retreat from the fight to protect and secure the right to press and the right to free expression that mark the core virtue of the Constitution. With a view to securing the withdrawal of the bill to amend the Press Arbitration Act, I am pleased and honored that we all have gathered today for this international talk on the concerns raised by the bill to amend the Press Arbitration Act for the freedom of press and expression in Korea. Co-hosted by Kwon Eun-hee, Choi Yeon-suk, Lee Tae-gyu, and convened by the Transitional Justice Working Group and the People's Party. I deeply appreciate the works of today's honorable guests. Honorable Ms. Kwon Eun-hee, Professor David Kaye, the former UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of the right to freedom of opinion and expression. Professor and internationally renowned human rights defender, Mr. Jared Genser, the founder of Freedom Now. Dr. Ethan Hisuk-shin, senior legal analyst at TJWG, and Mr. Ryu Jae-hwa, attorney at law, Sejong Law Firm. We are here together today across the globe because freedom of expression is not limited to national concern, yet it is the core part and the parcel of universal and fundamental human rights that serves as the very foundation of the world democracy. Global journalism institutions, including RSF, IFJ, and WAN-IFRA, stood in one voice against the adoption of the bill to amend the Press Arbitration Act, and have pointed out in common that the bill will create an atmosphere of fear among the journalists, that the free environment of journalism in Korea will be degraded, that the bill will impair and undermine the virtue and tradition of democracy in Korea. Many experts have commonly clarified that the language of the bill is not clear, excessively restrictive, disproportionate, and thus is not in conformity with the principles enshrined in the Constitution. The National Human Rights Commission of Korea has eventually warned the Speaker of the National Assembly that a cautious review is required about the bill currently under discussion in the National Assembly, and the bill itself has the danger of generating chilling effect on the freedom of press. In view of the harsh criticism within and outside the nation, the National Assembly has created an 8-member consultation body. But the Minju Party, the majority party, is determined to submit the bill to the plenary for adoption. Given the silence of the President and his office, the President Moon is strongly requested to clarify his position concerning possible adoption of the bill that suppresses freedom of the press. Even the right-oriented members among the majority pointed out that the bill would forfeit the freedom of press and deteriorate the democracy in this nation. The people of this party and world citizens are awfully watching now. The history would certainly remember by whose hands this anti-democratic, regressive, and freedom-negating vicious law has been made. I would like to strongly urge the journalists and people of this country to pay keen attention to today's discussion. You are cordially requested to be a judge of deciding whether the bill is intended to prevent the transmission of fake news and to protect the general public, or whether it is a legislation that protects those in political powers and serves only their interests through forfeiting the freedom of the press. With the guidance of the experts on this matter and people of this nation, the People's Party will spare no means and resources to halt the adoption of this bill, and will certainly correct this historical error. I, once again, strongly urge the majority party and authorities to withdraw and rescind this vicious and harmful exercise. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Let me now give the floor to 권 의원님. 한글로 한번 읽으시면 괜찮을까요? Well, I have a statement that could be made by the Honorable Ms. Kwon In-hee, and she's now with us here. And before I sort of translate the transcript into English, I just got another statement from the panel statement for panel discussion on amendments to press arbitration from the Human Rights Watch, and Human Rights Watch says they are regretful for not being here, and then but they want to show great interest, and also they want to show great concern for this issue. So let me read. They were asking me to read the statement in public, so now I will try to read it through. Thank you for the opportunity to present comments at this event, and apologies for our inability to present a statement personally. Human Rights Watch has worked out on human rights issues in South Korea for more than 35 years, and we are very concerned about the increasing use of punitive measures against peaceful speech. 평화로운 발언과 표현에 대한 징벌적 조치가 점점 늘어나고 있다는 것에 대해서 가장 크게 우려하고 있다, 이렇게 의견을 표시해 주셨습니다. The draft amendments to the press arbitration law, which are the latest example of that trend, will seriously impair the rights to freedom of expression, freedom of information, and media freedom, and will discourage critical reporting by the media if passed in the current form. 그래서 이 추세 중에 하나가 지금의 개정안인데, 이대로 통과된다면 표현의 자유, 정보 언론의 자유가 심각하게 저해되고 언론의 비판적 보도를 막을 것이다, 이렇게 지금 이야기해 주었습니다. And while we welcome the revisions to the bill proposed by the Democratic Party, the fact is those changes still do not bring it into compliance with international standards. Even as revised, the media can be severely penalized for even a minor factual error if a plaintiff claims to have been injured by the error and face damages that are disproportionate to any harm caused. 수정안을 민주당에서 여당에서 제시했지만 여전히 그 수정안 자체도 국제적 기준에 현저하게 미치지 못하고 있고 또 사소한 실수만 있어도 언론이 중대한 처벌을 받고 그리고 아주 불균형적인 큰 손해배상 명령을 받을 수 있다 이렇게 그 우려를 전달했습니다. Disproportionate sanctions, such as heavy fines, can have a significant chilling effect on freedom of expression in South Korea, which is already constrained by criminal defamation laws that should be abolished. 이분들의 입장은 이 법안이 그 표현의 자유에 대해서 굉장히 제한을 가지고 올 것이고 동시에 이미 있는 그 명예훼손에 관해서 형사적으로 처벌하는 이미 있는 많은 법률들이 또 여전히 이미 많은 그 언론의 자유를 침해하고 있다 이렇게 이야기를 합니다. The chilling effect is of particular concern that it impacts the press since an independent and diverse media that disseminates a wide range of information ideas and plays a critical role in supporting the functioning of a democratic society. And while the deletion of the presumption of intent in certain circumstances, 비록 그 법안 수정안에서 그 고의를 추정하는 그래서 언론사에게 막중한 입증 책임을 부담시키는 그런 규정은 수정안에서는 비록 지금 배제됐지만 여전히 나머지 막연한 규정들이 언론에 대해서 중대한 권리 침해를 야기하고 있다 이렇게 이야기를 합니다. So while the deletion of the presumption of intent in circumstances is presented as a positive step, we note that it has been replaced by language that appears to put the burden on the defendant to show that they acted without intent or gross negligence. If the media is forced to bear the burden of proof, the bill will continue to force journalists to choose between revealing their resources or facing heavy damages. 그래서 결국 그 언론 종사하시는 분들이 취재원을 결국 알려야 될까 아니면은 심각한 처벌을 받을 것이냐를 선택할 수밖에 없는 그런 입장에 놓이게 될 것이다 이렇게 전망을 합니다. It is particularly troubling that this bill seeks to impose punitive damages on the media alone. While South Korean law currently allows punitive damages in certain limited types of cases, there is presently no general punitive damages law. 그리고 이렇게 징벌적인 배상을 규정하고 있는 법안이 한국법의 전체 체계 속에서 굉장히 희귀하고 드문데 이렇게 언론에 대해서 징벌적 배상을 요구하는 법률이 부적당하다 이렇게 이야기를 합니다. 그래서 this bill could allow imposition of punitive damages on a press report, but not on those responsible for wrongful acts on which the press is reporting. 징벌적 배상을 언론에다가 물리고 그리고 보도 속에서 잘못을 한 사람들에게는 처벌이 없다. 그러니 언론에 대해서 과도한 처벌을 하게 되는 것이다라고 이제 판단하고 있습니다. Members of the National Assembly should reject the revised bill and ensure that any new proposal complies with the international standards for freedom of speech. 그래서 휴먼 라이츠 와치에서는 지금 수정안을 거부해야 된다. 수정안을 거부해야 되고 그리고 만약 또 다른 개정안이 나온다면 그 개정안은 언론의 자유에 대한 그 국제 기준에 적합해야 한다. 이렇게 이야기하고 있습니다. 그러니까 휴먼 라이츠 와치의 판단에서는 제가 볼 땐 지금 현재 수정안은 국제 기준과는 거리가 있어서 새로운 안을 필요하다면 새로운 안을 만들어야 된다. 이것이 입장인 것 같습니다. 네, 감사합니다. 그리고 I'm sorry to take so much time myself. I'm moderating, but I'm translating at the same time. So, now let me briefly explain what the Honorable Ms. Kwon has been trying to present in her statement. She wrote in Korean, but I will just summarize some of the points, some salient points and important points that she was trying to make. By the way, Honorable Kwon became famous. She's a lawyer, but she became famous while she was working for the police, and then she became highly acclaimed for her investigation into the manipulation of election news, and then manipulation of fake news, and also responses actually perpetuated by the hands of the public authorities. And she was also in charge of the so-called Druking incident, where the malicious comments were the core of the problem, and also the case later turned out to be a blow to the free exercise of the political expression. Anyway, so she is the one who understands and who has a hands-on knowledge about the importance of freedom of speech, and also the manipulation and interference with those rights, and how those manipulations and interferences could exert negative impacts on the public life, including public elections. Okay, Honorable Guan has mentioned that first of all, the ambiguity of all the provisions, and the notion and also definition of fake news, and also distorting the title of the news, and also the pictures presented in the articles, and also the content of articles are different from each other. So these types of provisions are far from being clear. So that was the first. And also she was mentioning that the burden of proof issue, the presumption of intent, presumption of heavy negligence, and also, and at the same time, the journalism or the journalist should bear the burden of proof to prove that they are not guilty, which would in turn exercise such a severe negative impacts upon the freedom of expression on the part of the journalism. And also, she was saying the punitive damage, the 5 times actual damage thing, and again, she's mentioning as a lawyer that this is such a rare provision in the whole structure of the Korean legislations. And also, she is mentioning that under Korean Constitution, it's again a violation of the right to equal rights. So she raises an issue that why we put such a heavy burden of proof and such heavy legal responsibility upon the journalism alone. And that was another point. And also, she was mentioning the laws under the Korean Constitution. The laws should be legitimate, and the laws should have proper method, and then also the damage should be left to the minimum when there's a legal restriction. So she is, I think she's raising all the issues of constitutional law and the conformity and the coordination between this law, so-called this bill, and the Constitution. And finally, she says the members of National Assembly, as part of our constitutional institution, should be able to review all the bills with a high level of caution, and that's what she's trying to appeal to the members of the National Assembly. Thank you. Thank you. I hope I was right about her statement. Anyway, okay. Mr. Cancer, would you like to go now, or is it okay for you?
Sure, absolutely. 감사합니다. And thank you for having me with you here today. I'm the Managing Director of Perseus Strategies, a public interest and international human rights law firm known especially for its work freeing political prisoners. from a diverse array of countries like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Cameroon, the Maldives, and Burma, among others. I have over 20 years of experience as an international human rights lawyer. In addition, I'm an adjunct professor of law at Georgetown University Law Center, and I've published books with Oxford and Cambridge University Press on topics such as the UN Security Council in the Age of Human Rights, the responsibility to protect, and the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. My prior pro bono clients have included people like former Czech Republic President Václav Havel and Nobel Peace Prize laureates Desmond Tutu, Liu Xiaobo, and Elie Wiesel. I wanted my remarks today by emphasizing the great warmth and admiration that I feel towards the South Korean people. I have made about a dozen trips to South Korea over the years, most especially working to advance the human rights of the people of North Korea. And I only wish that I could be with so many friends. And I say this up front because although I understand that the debate over the press arbitration law is taking place in a heated political context, my concerns about the bill have nothing to do with politics and everything to do with this admiration that I have for South Korea and its people. Indeed, as a country which emerged from a military dictatorship to become a vibrant, rights-respecting democracy, South Korea has been a global leader in advocating for the universality of freedom and an exemplar of how to make and sustain such an important transition. I feel compelled to speak out now, however, because I am deeply troubled by the proposed amendment to the press arbitration law in the National Assembly. This bill could limit a wide array of expression, and with its vague language and disproportionate damages, it will reduce critical news reporting and suppress unpopular or minority opinion. I also feel it will compel media to self-censor legitimate speech to avoid possible lawsuits and thereby restrict the free flow of information that is critical in a democracy. Under Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which South Korea has ratified, the exercise of the right to freedom of expression carries with it special duties and responsibilities. It may be subject to certain restrictions, but only when those restrictions are provided by law, respect of the rights or reputations of others, and for the protection of national security or of public order or public health or morals. In its general comment number 25, the UN Human Rights noted that the free communication of ideas is essential and implies a free press. The proposed amendments to the Press Arbitration Act must be brought into conformity with international human rights law, particularly the government's obligation to uphold necessity and proportionality under Article 19 of the IPR. Less restrictive and more narrowly tailored measures may be taken to prevent the malicious spread of fake news rather than proceeding with in the proposed amendment. This amendment has also been widely criticized for violating international human rights law by the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of opinion and expression on prominent human rights organizations such as Human Rights Watch and Article 19, and domestic human rights groups. The proposed amendment authorizes a court to assess compensation up to 5 times of the damages if reporting causes property damage, infringes on personality rights, or causes emotional distress, even when the falsity in report is not material. Human Rights Watch noted that individuals who are criticizing the press will be able to recover punitive damages based on minor factual errors. The proposed amendment also creates a presumption that an alleged false or manipulated report was made with intention or gross negligence, including when retaliatory or repetitive reports have been made. However, the law does not specify what will constitute retaliatory. This vagueness will lead to arbitrary application of the law and creates a presumption of guilt, which forces journalists to choose between revealing their sources to counter the presumption or risk extreme damages. Throughout Asia, many governments have gone against international human rights law and have implemented vague laws jeopardizing press freedom. Most recently in Hong Kong, vague provisions under the 2020 national security law have been used to, quote, investigate journalists and other media outlets who allegedly endanger national security without providing any specificity about why an investigation is warranted. Such laws have also existed in countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Cambodia. And in these countries, journalists feel compelled to self-censor to avoid writing on certain topics, reviewing pro-democracy books, or even reporting on peaceful dissent. The proposed amendment's vague language amplifies a disturbing trend in regional legislation that compels media outlets to censor themselves to avoid punishment. Like in Hong Kong, the proposed amendment to the press arbitration law removes the definition of, quote, false or fabricated report in Article 2, 17-3, and replaces it with, quote, untrue report, which appears even more vague and wider in scope. And thus, this bill could limit a wider range of expression and compel self-censorship to avoid publishing reports that trigger unwarranted lawsuits. Such a result is incongruous with a free and democratic society. The proposed amendment follows another regional trend in legislation, which unfairly holds journalists liable for the potential consequences of their reporting, rather than narrowly for reporting falsehoods. For example, in Cambodia and Thailand, incitement to disturb public order or reporting which causes public fear or alarm carry prison sentences. Likewise, under the proposed amendment, journalists can face up to 5 times the damages for causing emotional distress with their reporting. This proposed amendment, if adopted by the National Assembly, will bolster copycat gag laws throughout the region, which will similarly seek to inhibit reporting where the content of reporting is concerning to readers. Countries which already attract scrutiny for jailing journalists could well follow in the path of South Korea and now advance civil penalties aimed at limiting so-called fake news and cyberbullying. In Singapore, both criminal and civil libel laws are notoriously broad and have been used to investigate and prosecute journalists who have criticized government officials and powerful private citizens in a wide array of ways. In short, I strongly believe that the adoption of this proposed amendment will muzzle political discourse in South Korea and threaten its multi-party democracy. Instead of continuing down this perilous path, South Korea must instead identify ways to respond to false news in ways that also ensure protections for human rights. Overbroad laws can be interpreted in any manner by the state and easily result in human rights violations. They can be politically motivated and arbitrarily applied by a ruling party and may focus solely on cases which are of concern to that party. This is not a path to stitching the fabric of a society together, but rather one that will tear it apart. The adoption of this amendment will not merely restrict the rights of South Koreans, but will also have a devastating effect on South Korea's reputation among its fellow democracies around the world. I therefore urge both President Moon and the National Assembly to withdraw the proposed amendment and only reintroduce the bill that, after broad consultation, is viewed widely as consistent with South Korea's obligations under Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, I personally have been able to work with Mr. Ganser on so many occasions. I met him I think about 20 years ago when he was trying to struggle with the issue of North Korean human rights. And he belongs to the pioneer and the first generation of foreign lawyers and foreign human rights activists with strong interest in the lives of the North Korean people. And at the time, I think the DLA Piper, the law firm report was commissioned by President Václav Havel, right? Yeah.
And Elie Wiesel.
Who?
Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, who himself was the survivor of Auschwitz.
Yes. So, and then DLA Piper law firm eventually presented a legal report on the violations of North authorities in human rights. And second, he has been rescuing so many human rights defenders, political leaders from all over the world. So he is somehow called as extractor. Is that right? And then he saved people. He helped, as he said, Václav Havel and Tutu, and also Anwar Ibrahim, right? Anwar Ibrahim, and then of Malaysia, and Aung San Suu Kyi. And so now I understand that your story is getting into the movie, right? And,
television, yes.
Could you tell us about that a little bit later?
Sure.
Yeah. I really am looking forward to seeing your episodes on TV. And then I heard Orlando Bloom is involved in that project as well. So in each and every episode, you're going to be helping and rescuing some of the people from all over the world. I mean, that'll be really interesting, and also that'll be really I don't know. I'm very grateful for that as well. Anyway, we will continue to work together with. Now I'm happy that we are working again on this the Press Arbitration Act revision. And still we are working on the freedom. So I'm interested to hear more about your experience and the link between the freedom of expression, the democracy, and the importance of political leaders, and also political elections as well. So now let us turn to Mr. Dr. Shin. He's the one actually who made the correspondence and of the present Special Rapporteur on the Freedom of Expression, Irene Khan. Actually, he and his group wrote a letter asking for a communication, and then in that line, the Special Rapporteur Irene Khan agreed to send a communication to the Korean government on this issue. So, and that also formed one of the bases upon which we are speaking today. So, and he is now working as a member of the 8-member in consultation body, inter-party body. So I think, and he's going to attend another negotiation table even this afternoon. So I think he's the one who will give us very updated and hands-on information and knowledge on what's going on right now in the National Assembly. I would like to welcome Dr. Hisuk Shin. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction. So as Song just mentioned, I am currently serving as a quote-unquote expert member for one of the expert members for the 8-member consultative body. But I do want to state up front that today I am speaking here in my personal capacity and not as a member of that particular body. I will try to provide a short recap of the more recent developments concerning the amendment bill to the Press Arbitration Act. If you look at the slides that I prepared. So just to see how this all played out from the beginning, in mid-August last month, actually, the standing committees of the National Assembly passed the amendment bill. And it was expected that the bill itself would be put to a final vote before the plenary session in the end of August. It was around this time that I actually had the privilege and honor of sending a letter to the Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression on behalf of my group, Transition Justice Working Group, and attorney Ryu Jae-ha. And surprisingly, the Special Rapporteur, Ms. Irene Khan, responded very quickly on August 27th. So the letter was delivered to the South Korean government, and the ruling Democratic Party, reacted by postponing the final vote for at least a month and agreeing to create an 8-member consultative body, of which I'm a member, and to actually put the bill before the plenary session on September 27, which will be Monday next week. So the consultative body itself, as I said, has 8 members, 4 lawmakers and 4 experts from the 2 main political parties in South Korea. And the main areas of contention are basically these 3 issues, namely the punitive damages, the assumption of intent gross negligence, which is another way of saying that who bears the burden of proof, and also the right to request the blocking of browsing. So the most contentious issue, obviously, would be the punitive damages. So just to recap the state of the punitive damages law in this country. So we have traditionally have a continental civil law legal tradition. So until 10 years ago, we didn't have punitive damages in our legal system. It was first introduced into our legal system in 2011 by an act of the National Assembly in a provision for the Fair Transaction and Subcontracting Act. And subsequently, there have been a number of laws passed by the National Assembly in a peaceful fashion that created punitive damages, usually treble damages, but also quintuple damages into our legal system. And this is another interesting point to note is that most of these punitive damages have been allowed to remedy unfair business or labor or consumer rights practices. So, and also these past laws usually mostly targeted the economic damages caused by these unfair practices, whereas the new bill actually proposes will concern mostly solatium for the emotional or reputational damages. So moving on to the next slide, it's also interesting to note that although many common law jurisdictions and some civil law jurisdictions as well have adopted punitive damages in their legal system, no one, at least to my knowledge, specifically provides for punitive damages for press reports. Usually, most laws provide for codified punitive damages for general civil cases or for defamation cases. Now, in the process of this 8-member consultative group meeting, the ruling Democratic Party, DP, proposed a number of changes last Friday, September 17th, that purported to somewhat water down the worst provisions of the amendment bill. And in terms of punitive damages, as it was already discussed earlier, the controversial term, which was a false or fabricated report, has been deleted in its entirety from the legislation. Unfortunately, that term has been replaced by quote-unquote untrue report by the press. And arguably, this as Jared mentioned, that probably has a broader scope than the previous term used. Also, the DP, the Democratic Party, suggested another two options for how to codify punitive damages. So the option one, original option, would have been to provide for a maximum of a quintuple or 5 times the actual damages. The second option that they suggested would actually provide for maximum of treble damages, but under the condition that the damages must be at least 50 million won, or around 42,000 US dollars. So in a sense, the second option can be worse because in most civil cases, you usually don't see this kind of damage going up to 50 million won. Also interesting to note that the DP's new proposal deleted the exception for the public interest reporting when it comes to punitive damages. Next issue would be the assumption of intent, gross negligence, or the burden of proof. So again, the ruling party suggested these changes, and so there was an entire clause that provided for assumption of intent or gross negligence when there's, for example, vengeful or repetitive false or fabricated reports. So that provision is gone in its entirety. But instead, they added a new phrase in the another clause that basically stated that the press basically has to bear a burden of proof to actually disprove that there have been gross intent or gross negligence on their part in such false reporting. So this actually, this probably is an improvement from the earlier version, but it still doesn't resolve this issue of making the press actually prove that they have done, there was no intent or gross negligence on their part. Lastly, another contentious issue is the so-called right to request blocking of browsing. So this actually was supposedly conceived after a decision by the European Court of Justice in Google Spain v. AEPD in 2014, so the so-called right to be forgotten. And the earlier proposal, the earlier bill, actually provided for 3 grounds for making this kind of right to have the internet service provider or the internet news service delete the link to the article. Now they've only left the personal privacy issue or reportings that concern key components of personal privacy. Unfortunately, this one last remaining provision is also a very broad and vague term. So this could still leave the room for abuse and chilling effect on the reporting by the press. Lastly, so these are the issues that have been so far discussed in the 8-member consultative body. But I would also like to add that there are other related issues that probably should be considered in the broader perspective when it comes to the press freedom or freedom of expression in South Korea. So the most obvious and most problematic would be the existing criminal provisions on defamation and so-called insult. So these are found in our criminal code and also in the Information and Communication Network Act. And they actually provide not only financial fines, but they also provide for imprisonments up to 3 or 5 years. So these are very heavy, very strong
5 years?
penalties.
Did you say 5 years?
Almost, no, sorry.
5 years. Imprisonment, 5 years? Did you say that?
So these different provisions have different penalties,
okay.
but yeah, so certain provisions have up to 5 years of imprisonment. So that's what I would say most people would consider it very severe. And also there is also the issue of regulation of the personal media and social media that is arguably no less influential, if not more influential than the traditional mass media these days. And we also have laws that have been criticized for overly restricting the freedoms in this arena as well. And finally, there's also the issue of the public broadcasters in this country, and this has been issued under basically every administration that the public broadcasters have not been politically neutral or independent. So that's also an issue that has to probably should be discussed in the context of this broader media freedom issues. Thank you. That sums up my representation.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, 2 questions. First, do you think the majority party will pass it in the next 4 days? And second question, do you think, is there any possibility that the majority party will come up with another revision, or is there any chance that they will withdraw this revision at this time and then try another, make another try sometime later? Because reasonably saying we have a presidential election forthcoming presidential election in the next March, which means we have 6 months ahead. So, another concern is do we really need to make this revision in haste at a time like this? So, as a member of the consultation body, could we share your estimation?
So again, this is purely my personal guess, but obviously I don't have a crystal ball on this matter. But I think at least the ruling party has said that they will put the bill up for a vote next Monday. So I don't think they have a back down on their position. So I would assume that there's a good chance that they will proceed. But I guess the wild card is the level of criticism, both domestically and also internationally. So I think holding this kind of meetings to hear views both in South Korea and also beyond over the world, would help to put pressure both on the ruling party and also the government to reconsider. And I also want to note that even if the bill is passed in the National Assembly, the President Moon, still has the power to veto the legislation. So that's perhaps another way to actually bring about the demise of this bill. And I think even if they do vote on this bill next week, I think there's a good chance that they would further water down, make further changes to the bill. I don't know how substantial or whether it just be cosmetic, but I think, for example, like this proposal for like the minimum 50 million won as punitive damages, I think that's probably more of a bargain. Might actually more be a bargaining suggestion, and I think the ruling party will at least try to appear to be making more concessions, at least to win this kind of battle over the public opinion. So I would say that the proposal that they made last Friday is probably not the final version, and there are probably rooms for more changes. Although, as I said, I don't know how substantive it would be, rather than being more symbolic of nature. And yes, as everyone has mentioned already, people have mentioned already, because of the presidential election coming up, I think it's a very delicate political time. And not only that, I think it's really problematic that the DP, the Democratic Party, has focused solely on press reports. As I said, there are other related media issues that should be considered in total, not in this kind of piecemeal fashion. And I think it would, which is why it probably would make more sense to create this kind of expert committee in the National Assembly to have more time to actually deliberate on these issues, because they really concern the essence of our democracy. So for all these reasons, I think pushing ahead with this bill next week would be very problematic.
Okay, I think, so participants today here and also there, Mr. Ganser, may have comments, may have questions, but well, you can freely speak in either Korean or in English. So, So first of all, let me give. Do you have any comments or questions from there? Is that right? Do you have any comments or questions at the beginning?
Not for the moment.
Okay, thank you. 질문 뭐 하시거나 뭐 하시려면 하시겠어요? Okay. Okay, let me introduce Miss An Hye-jin, our spokesperson for our People's Party.
It's an honor to be here. I think it will be very helpful in many ways. So the media and politics are inseparable. Is media purification or purity, or political purification or purity? I want to hear what you think.
Okay. So, okay. Next question, or is that?
언론 정화가 우선인지, 정치 정화가 우선인지를 궁금해서요.
뭐?
언론 정화. 언론 개혁이 우선인지 정치 개혁이 우선인지. I'm sorry, I can't go English.
So your question is about whether we should focus on the reform of the politics, or whether we should first focus on the reform of politics.
Right.
I think it's a big question. Yes. It's a very big question, but well,
it could be a difficult question. I'm sorry.
Well, no. Human rights violations usually come from bad politics, and then bad politics will result in the restrictions on the freedom of expression. So, okay, we will touch on that issue, and also, okay, and another question or comments? Okay,
I have a question for Dr. Swin. Do you think President Moon would veto the bill even if the bill would not watered down?
Shall I answer it now? Or yeah, again, so I can't speak for the president, but I think from at least what I've observed, I don't think the Blue House has ever specifically supported or opposed this bill, and I think that's probably because they also understand, more so than the members of the ruling party, that this bill is very problematic and will be subjected to international criticism. And it's basically the government officials that would usually face such criticism, not the members of the National Assembly. And so I think I would say the president is in quite a bind. And I understand from press reports that it was actually the Blue House that actually advised the ruling party to postpone the vote last month. So if there is this kind of international campaign or domestic campaign to actually bring about the withdrawal of this bill, I would say the president or the Blue House is probably more amenable to these suggestions. And I think I think it'd be ideal for the government, the president, to actually ask his party to withdraw this bill. But I really can't say how he will act if the National Assembly does manage to pass the bill in the coming weeks. So that's something that probably we should think about.
What do you think during your consultation? Did you get an impression that international pressure is actually working and playing in the minds of the majority people?
I can't say for sure, but at least as I understand it, I was invited to join the consultative body in my expert capacity to basically relay this kind of concerns from the international community, from the UN and from also international human rights NGOs. So that's what I have been trying to do over the past 2 weeks. I don't know how successful I have been, but I'm certainly hoping that it will have this kind of positive influence on the discussions that we have there.
Well, the reason why I'm asking that is that this gathering has been made in such a haste because of the severity of the issue of the revision, this amendment. And then I had a exchange of emails with more than 10 international NGOs. And I also spoke with Irene Khan, the current special rapporteur, actually over an hour yesterday about her availability for the conference and about her views about the situation. And also I spoke with Debbie Kay, who is now still driving somewhere in LA. But anyway, we had a big discussion. I have also had a very personal discussion with him as well. And then what I felt was there's a big pressure within the international community. I even think some people in this country here in Korea, they may not feel the risk and danger that this bill is proposing to us. And somehow I feel that the level of criticism, the level of intensity of criticism in this country is lower than lower than expected in a way. And then many of the experts, many of the NGOs that I spoke with, they were concerned about chain effects of the chilling effect, chain phenomenon of the chilling effects upon other countries. And somebody was telling me that you are actually abandoning Hong Kong by this law. And in Hong Kong, the right to information and then the right to expression is now, is being negated to the fullest extent. And now if Korea comes up with this law, then that will give a very bad signal and message to other countries. And then if you go to Thailand, there's, I think Dr. Shin is very familiar with that. The lèse majesté law, under which people are not expected to make political satires or to make laughable satires about their king. And if they do that, they will get imprisoned. So this is not just, we are looking at this matter from just, somehow we are looking at this issue from a domestic political point of view, but international community and NGOs and UN, they are watching us from a comparative and more regional and international, from a bigger picture. So we better know what we are doing right now, and then we better know what we are doing, our actions would exert, what kind of influences upon other countries. So, and somehow I have a feeling that Korean politics, we are so much preoccupied with the domestic political issues and the possibilities for the elections. And now we somehow lose tight control over this issue. So that is one of the reasons why we are having this gathering, to alert people on the danger and then to tell them that the winter is coming. And then so, all right. And then I think the next issue, so we have spent about an hour for this gathering. And then the next issue would be what we can do for the next 4 days and what we will do after the possible adoption of this amendment bill. And that was, again, the question that I was asked by some of the experts, UN experts and other NGOs. They were asking me, what will you do if this bill is adopted? What will you do before the bill is adopted? And then we can think of international campaigns, but, we may work as an international network of NGOs or coalition of human rights defenders, but what will be the role of a political party such as ours, People's Party, in this struggle? So, and also, I'm really happy that we have Mr. An Chul-soo here, a very important political figure in this country, and then he is personally quite committed and involved in this too, and in this issue. So I think we should make a difference together. So what other things we can do before they adopt, the majority adopts it? So in the next 4 days. And the second question is, if they adopt it, what will be the next course of action? Okay. Zara, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Yeah. Given your experience in many other countries, first question that I want to hear more from your expertise is, what will be the relation between freedom of expression and freedom of press and the democracy or the tyranny? And the second, so given your vast experience in international campaigns, so what will be the best course of action in the next 4 days, and then and even after the adoption of its bill for amendment, and then so from your view and eyes in the DC,
sure,
how does it look? So those are the questions that I want to formulate.
Well, I mean, as I said, I'm here not because of the politics, but because of the human rights questions that are raised by this amendment to the law, and it looks very bad from abroad, I would say. I, as I said, have this very warm and close relationship, with your country and with your people from many different political backgrounds. Because of my admiration for what your country has achieved over its history, and especially in persevering through a military dictatorship to become a democracy, right? And an example that set for the world and for the region and sub-region. And so, to me, it's really gut-wrenching to see South Korea move in this direction, and frankly, I don't quite understand it. And I'd be interested to hear more from others as well. But of course, there has been a global trend towards more fake news and very damaging stories that have come out. In the United States, we wrestle with this literally on a daily basis. Fake news about COVID vaccines and and our elections and other kinds of things, right? But a robust democracy finds a way to ensure that the limitations on speech are very, very narrowly constrained, and that really the best remedy to speech that you disagree with is speech opposing that speech and speaking out against misinformation or inaccurate information that is being put forward. And so I think that obviously the people of South Korea will have to decide what they ultimately want as a society, but I am very worried about the interrelationship between restrictions on a free press and what that will mean, both in terms of self-censorship of journalists that will be afraid to publish things that might be critical of powerful interests. I'm worried about what that will mean for what the average consumer of news in South Korea will see in their daily newspaper and on television, right? And will journalists that have very good sources and multiple sources, for example, to reveal a corruption scandal at a city level or a national level or otherwise, and they put forward their story, are they then going to face as a first salvo against them, and journalists don't generally have a lot of money, news organizations can have more, but are they going to basically immediately face a weaponized legal system that seeks to crush them financially as a response to avoiding a debate on the substance and merits of the arguments that are being put forward based on the evidence that's put forward? So this is my fear of the direction that South Korea would head if this amendment is in fact adopted on Monday. I think that President Moon has an opportunity here to play a leadership role, which is what I would hope a president would want to do, and to say, to people who are fair-minded about this, and there are people who will be political on all sides of these issues, and there always are. But to any fair-minded person, I think you can objectively say, yes, fake news and emotionally damaging news that is totally not grounded in any reality are real concerns that democratic societies need to struggle with how to handle. But there are ways to constrain what might be actionable speech in ways that are consistent with the requirements of international law, right? And so, for example, Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights has what's referred to as a general comment to it. And that's like 30 pages of explanation of how do you weigh the trade-offs between different aspects of freedom of opinion expression, freedom of the press, and so forth. If there's a legitimate concern about the impact of fake news, cyberbullying, or these kinds of phenomena, then smart people can get in a room across the political spectrum with international human rights experts. And I'd be more than happy to volunteer to help the government of South Korea sit down with people from different perspectives and hammer out a bill that could get at the underlying problem, if in fact it's a real problem that you're really trying to go after. If it's really all about politics and it's about, any ruling party in South Korea or anywhere else really looking for a sword, to use to destroy anyone that stands up against them and puts forward critical speech, well, then that's a totally different kind of situation that we're talking about here. And I fear that that's in part what is happening, based on my best understanding, that that's part of what's happening here. I hope that that's not correct. Ultimately, after Monday, if this amendment is adopted, President Moon, in my view, if he wanted to demonstrate leadership, should veto the bill if it remains as it is, and say to his own party in the National Assembly, I'm all for signing a bill that will go after the excesses of speech that are really about, exceptionally damaging fake news and cyberbullying, and let's craft a bill that we can get a consensus on, and that international human rights experts can agree is very narrowly constrained to go after the problem and has the least possible impact on political discourse, right? And can't be turned into a weapon, an overbroad weapon that could be applied against anyone that you disagree with, right? Because unfortunately, this is what is likely to happen, I think, if this bill is adopted. So let me stop there. But I think that's, you asked a very difficult question that one could write books about. And so and that's my quick reply.
Thank you very much. Actually, while I was having a conversation with Irene, I was suggesting some of the measures, but that usually are being taken by international bodies. First, I asked her, and I asked the United Nations to make a request for a country visit to find out the truth, and also not just a country visit, but sort of academic visit or technical visit to find out. And I also told human rights organization and the UN experts that once they have clarified the issues, the problems of this law, and if this law is adopted, in my view, they are obligated to investigate the after effects, and then also the result and implications of the passage of this law. So I was of the view that the international community, including the United Nations, should never give up on having watching eyes on this issue even after the adoption of the bill. And then also, so what can we do afterwards? First, we can do international campaigns, okay, including writing letters to United Nations or trying to work with other international human rights NGOs, and also we can wage national campaigns for the presidential office to veto this law, and also to take measures to mitigate mitigate the damage as much as possible. And also, I don't know, what else can we do after the adoption of this bill? And what will be the implication? Not as a member of but
Can I ask a question? Because what implications are there for the law and your Constitution, which provides for rights of freedom of expression as well? I assume a legal challenge to a law, if the president were to sign it rather than veto it, would be a possibility. But I'd be interested to hear how you all are thinking about this, because it sounds like you think it's inevitable. The law will be passed by the National Assembly. It isn't clear whether President Moon will sign it. He would likely sign it, but you can campaign, obviously, in a dramatic way with international pressure and national pressure to persuade him to.
So you're mentioning challenges based upon Korean constitutions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm wondering if that's a possibility or not.
Are you? Can you
Sure.
respond to that?
Yeah. So basically, we have a constitutional court that's based on the German model, and so that was actually created after democratization in 1987. So groups have the press and also the human rights groups have promised to sue, take this case, file legal challenges against this bill once this bill becomes law. And so it will probably most likely end up going to the Constitutional Court. But I must say that it's a very slow process. It usually takes at least 1-2 years, or even longer years, even longer time for the Constitutional Court to make a ruling. And the court, the way it works, there are nine justices on the bench, and 6 of them have to actually vote to overturn or find the law unconstitutional. So it's a pretty high threshold, and so we can't really. Obviously, we hope that the justices will find the bill, find the law problematic under the Constitution, and find it, strike it down. But that'll be quite a work. We have some work to do if we are to actually have a win in the Constitutional Court.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Arnold. Yes.
If the bill is passed on next Monday, as an opposition party, we will do two things. As you already mentioned, firstly, we will ask President Moon to veto the bill. And secondly, we will submit the case for unconstitutionality of the bill to the Constitutional Court in Korea.
Wow, that's a very valid move, but so it also has a component of political fight and also human rights campaign as well. I'm very happy to note that Mr. An and he's our leader in this party, and the People's Party are highly committed to the issue of human rights, such as North Korean human rights, and also the freedom of expression and all other constitutional rights. So, and I am very happy to note that. And so we will try to find ways to mitigate the damage and also to secure and protect the freedom of expression. Actually, there was another Korean lawyer who was supposed to be with us today, Mr. Liu Jae-hwa, who also works with Mr. Shin on this issue, Dr. Shin on this issue. And then he couldn't make it because his family is about to give birth to a child any minute. So he is in the hospital. So he could, Liu Jae-hwa could not make it. And I'm still losing David K, but I hope, and I suppose that he will at least come back to us with his own statement or his approval or his agreement in some of the parts we have said here today. And then, so we have already spent 1 hour and 16 minutes. So, any question from or any comment in Korean? 김근태 최고위원님 뭐 말씀하실 거 없으세요? 민노총과 관련해서 뭐 말씀하셔도 되는데요. 투쟁과 관련해서. 네, 그리고 뭐 괜찮으세요? 그 최고위원님? 한국말로 하셔도 돼요. 제가 말씀해 드릴게요. 네. Okay, Mr. Koo Hyung-mo, one of the members of our Supreme Decision Body.
저는 언론 지금 이게 지방 기초위원으로 있는데요. 이게 언론중재법이 통과가 되면 각 지자체별로 조례가 있는데 이 안을 가지고 이제 조례가 개정이 될 텐데 이제 궁금한 거는 우리나라 지역 언론의 환경이 아무래도 이제 그 행정 그 지자체 장의 이제 어떤 홍보 수단이나 지역 국회의원의 수단으로서 사용이 되고 있는데 이러한 중재법이 통과가 되면 그런 것들이 더 이제 강화가 될 거라고 이제 그런 걱정이 됩니다. 혹시나 미국이나 다른 나라에서도 이런 지역 언론들이 어떤 기득권층의 이제 어떤 나팔수로서 그렇게 환경이 조성돼 있는지 그런 거에 대한 또 어떤 국제적인 그런 환경 그것도 좀 궁금합니다.
근데 이게 법이 되면은 지역 언론들도 제한을 받는 거 아닌가요? 아니면은 지역 언론들이 더 그렇게
그 지역 언론에서도 이제 그 조례라는 게 있는데 보통 이제 우리가 법을 기초로 해서 조례가 만들어지고
그러니까
이제 중재법이 이제 통과가 되면 그걸 기초로 해서 이제 지방 언론들이 더 이런 정권의 어떤 기득권에 더 손을 들어주는 그런 환경이 조성이 되는데 그런 것들이 좀 더 우려가 되고 있습니다.
Well, thank you very much for that question. I mean, our member, esteemed member of our Supreme Decision-Making Body of this political party, Mr. Koo Hyung-mo, he's now he works as a member of the what can I say, district assembly of the Hwasong City, right? You are the member of the district assembly and the Hwasong City, and then he is quite familiar with the regional or familiar with the media in that region and in the city. And then the media in small cities are quite different from the national-wide press. And then small medias or small internet medias in the small cities, they have the tendency to be affected by the political leaders. And then his concern is if this law is passed, then at the district level, they will pass another regulations in line with this law. And then there's a danger that these small medias in small cities would just follow the instructions and then of those in power, and then so freedom of expression and freedom of information in the district levels and will get worsened by the passage of this law. So it's not just about big press, the press companies, it's not big journalism or nationwide phenomenon. It's more about freedom of the forfeiting the freedom of expression at the district level and in small cities. And then he was also asking questions whether you have any knowledge, Mr. Jarrett, about the press, the situation of the press, not in the big cities, but in the rural areas, the countryside, and how they are affected by the laws that restrict freedom of expression in the within the realm of central government or the National Assembly thing. And if Mr. Shin has any comments, you can also make it. Okay, Jared, could you?
Well, I mean, I don't have any particular knowledge of how things work in more rural communities in South Korea, although I can imagine it's similar in many other, as it is to many other countries in the world, where you have much smaller media outlets with very limited resources reporting on local news. And what that would mean with respect to this amendment would be that it would be much easier to basically knock out local media much more quickly with this five-fold damages for overbroad alleged national like violations of this new amendment. So violations of this new law. So again, I'm not an expert on that at all when it comes to how it works in South Korea, but I would imagine that it will have a much bigger effect in smaller communities where it would be very, very quickly possible for a small town newspaper, to go out of business with a lawsuit against it than it would be, if they had more resources. I'm sure that, national news organizations, television, newspapers, will still be engaging in self-censorship and be cautious, but they'll be more prepared to pick a fight and to stand up against lawsuits, and they'll have the resources to wage that fight, whereas I would imagine that would be less likely in rural areas.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that was a very valid question. Small medias, I mean, they are easier to be subjected to persecution, and then they have more worries about financial breakdown. So which means, the passage of this law would expose more danger in the local levels. Shin?
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that, and actually this legislation reminds me of the new Texas state abortion law, which also kind of, in a way, it's not the government that actually does these the regulation, but you actually ask the people, the private citizens, to become private attorney generals, basically, to enforce these laws. So I think that same effect will occur with this new legislation as well. And yeah, that's definitely a big concern.
Okay. Well, thank you. We will see. We have 4 more days to get the result, and then please let us be updated about about the current situations going on within the National Assembly, and I would appreciate that. And second, also after the passage of this bill, if so, then we will get a more streamlined of action plans for the future. So we'll be together on that as well. And I also hope our guest, all of us, could be together on that course of action and in that preparation as well.
I'm also curious, so when the bill is put before the National Assembly next Monday, I imagine the People's Party will try to filibuster it, and I'm also curious like for how long the bill can be delayed by filibuster. 한국어로 질문하겠습니다. 그 다음 주에 다음 주 월요일에 이 법안이 만약 본회의 상정이 된다면은 이제 국민의당에서도 필리버스터를 하실 것으로 이제 예상을 하는데 만약 그렇게 필리버스터를 할 경우에는 얼마나 이걸 지연시킬 수가 있는지 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
월요일에 필리버스터를 한다면 우리가 지연을 얼마나 시킬 수 있어요?
그 본회의에서 3분의 2 이상의 동의로 종결을 의결하거나 아니면은 회기가 종료되면서 필리버스터가 종결이 되는데 지금 그 3분의 2 정족수든 정의당, 국민의당, 그 더불어민주당을 제외한 제 정당이 반대하고 있기 때문에 이 정족수 충족은 안 될 것 같고요. 그 지금 현재 그 회기가 정기국회로 12월 10일까지 계속되기 때문에 회기로 따지면 12월 10일까지는 계속될 수 있습니다.
네, 꽤 오래 보면.
Okay, we had a technical conversation about how we can filibuster and how long we can do that and things like that. Okay. I would like to invite Mr. 안철수 for his possible last remarks for today. 한국말로 하셔도 되고요. 앞으로 어떻게 하실 의장님께서 정리해 주시고 해주시는 말씀하셔도 되고요. 감사하다는 말씀하실 수 있습니다.
아까 제가 그 영어로도 말씀드렸습니다만 만약에 이 법안이 지금 형태대로 통과가 된다면 저희가 해야 할 일은 두 가지입니다. 첫 번째로는 문재인 대통령에게 이 법안을 거부권 행사하라는 요구를 할 겁니다. 그래도 만약에 그 통과를 시킨다면 저희는 이 법안을 헌법재판소에다가 가지고 가서 위헌에 대한 그 소송을 진행을 할 생각입니다. 그러면서도 또 동시에 여러 외국의 여러 유엔을 포함한 기관들과 공조해서 이 문제에 대한 그 문제점들을 계속 그 강조를 하고 바꾸기를 촉구할 그런 생각입니다.
네, 감사합니다. 네, 1시간 반을 지냈기 때문에 이제 오늘 모임은 여기서 마칠까 생각을 합니다. Thank you very much. As we have spent about an hour and a half on this issue together, and it must be now. What time is it now there in the DC?
At 10:30 p.m.
Oh, okay. Okay. So thank you very much for being with us today and from a long distance. And also, I really thank Mr. Shin for being with us today. I mean, I know you're busy about that consultation, buddy. And I'm very pleased and honored to have our leader, Mr. Anchosu, and I'm also very honored to know that he has personal commitment. And what kind of intense personal commitment he has about the issue of democracy and about the issue of freedom of expression. And also, I would like to say special thanks to Honorable Kwon In-hee for convening this conference. And also, you said nothing but member of our Supreme Decision-Making Body and Mr. Kim Gun-tae. But you said nothing, but thank you for being with us, and Ku Hyung-mo, and all the people around in this room, and the media people as well. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. It was a very meaningful exercise. Thank you, Darret, and we will talk soon again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and you need to take a look at the statement, okay, and come back with. Could you revert to me with your proposal and whatever? All right. Thank you very much. This is it for the conference. 예, 오늘 이것으로서 오늘 모임을 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다. 수고하셨습니다.
고생 많으셨습니다.
대표님 수고하셨습니다.
아닙니다. 감사합니다. 네.
그럼 매일 모이세요?
운전 중이라는 사실이
추석 때는 좀 쉬었었는데
먹사기 힘드네.
며칠 남지가
네, 이게 내가 스테이트먼트를 보내라고 그래서 그러면 여기 참석한 게 되고.
제가 뭐
지금 도망가는